Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live broadcast, October 21st, 2015. Tonight we will have a Dhammapada verse, hopefully. So let's just want to get the story out here so I can be clear about the particulars once more. Yes. Okay. Test. Hello and welcome back to our study of the Dhammapada. Today we continue on with verse number 94, which reads as follows. Yasindriyani samathangatani asayatha saratina sudanta pahinamanasa anasavasa devapi tassa pihayanti tadino, which means whose faculties have become tranquil, samathangatani, who have gone to tranquility, like a horse tamed by a sarati, a charioteer. Bahinamanasa anasavasa, a mind that is dedicated for one whose mind is dedicated, who is without asava. Again, we have this taints, without these outflowings or these streams of defilement or of attachment. Devapi tassa pihayanti tadino. Even angels are pleased or hold dear such a one, basically. Even the angels find such a one to be dear. It's quite a poetic verse. We got the nice imagery of the horse trained by the charioteer, a person who trains their faculties. So this was taught, we are told, in regards to Mahakachayana. Mahakachayana, one of the 80 great disciples of the Buddha, and he lived much of his life in Avanti, we are told, which not significant in this story, but it's also significant if we want to know who Kachayana was. Kachayana is supposed to be the monk who sort of founded the study of Pali, because when he went to this country of Avanti, which is, I understand, outside of the area where they spoke the Magadhan, or what we now often refer to as Pali language, he had to translate the teachings because people didn't understand the teaching. So he had to first translate them into other people's language, but then he had to also teach people Pali so they could learn the Buddha's words for themselves, so they could help with translations, and rather than having to translate, so they could read the original text. So we have what is now called Kachayana, which is a grammar. It's the Kachayana, which means the book that's supposed to have been written by or been handed down by the tradition of Mahakachayana himself. And it begins Atto Akarasanyato, which is, according to tradition, supposed to be the words of the Buddha. And the Buddha remarked upon a monk who was sitting by the bank of a lake, and he was trying to think, he was thinking of the arising and ceasing of phenomena, which is Udayabhaya. And so he was repeating this to himself, and then he started to doze off, and he started he started mixing things up in his head. He was an elderly fellow, I think, and there was a swan out on the lake or some bird out on the lake, and so he started saying to himself, because it sounded like what he was saying sounded like udakapaka, which means bird on the lake. So he started saying instead udakapaka, instead of udayabaya. And the Buddha noticed what he was doing and kind of shook his head and said, Atto agara sanyato, which means the meaning is known by the agara, the letters or the words. So it's the wording is important, is what he was saying. And that's supposed to have been heard by Mahakachayana, who thought, yes, it's important that people get this language right, and so he started teaching Pali in the country in the places where they didn't speak Pali, or in Avanti. But what all this meant is that he was living far away from the Buddha, and even though he was living far away, because he was so well respected, and because he often apparently returned to pick the Buddha, to hear the Buddha's words, and to bring them back and translate them and share them with the people in Avanti, he would often travel great distances just to hear the Buddha talk. So they would always leave a seat out for Mahakachayana in expectation that he might show up. And the story goes that Saka, who's this Buddhist angel, supposed to be the king of the angels up in heaven, kind of like I guess a medieval Christian idea of concept of God up on a throne. And he would come down and listen to the Buddha's teaching, but he would also look out for the monks, and he was apparently quite fond of Mahakachayana, and would wait and see whether Mahakachayana was coming, and so he was thinking to himself, oh, it'd be great if he showed up. And suddenly he saw that one time he suddenly saw that Mahakachayana had come, and he immediately went over to Mahakachayana and bowed down to him and grasped his feet and bowed down with his head at his feet, and then stood respectfully and gave him flowers and perfumes and some, whatever they would do in India. It was a common thing to put flowers on people's feet in respect for them. Why? Because the feet are the lowest part of the body, so and the head is the highest. So the greatest way of paying the most ultimate symbolic respect is to put your head at someone else's feet. So that's become a tradition from olden times. And again, as usual, we've got these troublemaker monks who have nothing better to do than to criticize other people's good deeds, or other people's deeds, let's say, who are intent upon criticism. And more on criticism later, because criticism can be a good thing, and it's important to be critical. But these guys seem to have been overcritical, and this was what was going on in the earlier. We've had this seems to be a theme in this chapter, because we're talking. This is the Arahanta Vagga. So it's about arahants. It's talking about people who are enlightened, and the theme seems to be, even though other people don't get that, or don't get how awesome that is, or try to discount that. So these other monks were saying, what's going on with these two? Why is Saka paying respect only to Mahakachayana? Why doesn't he show that kind of respect to all the great disciples? So they're kind of criticizing Saka and not Mahakachayana, but it's indirect criticism, because they're saying, what's so special about him? Why should he pay respect to this one monk? He's just another one of the 80 great disciples. What's so special? And the Buddha heard what they were saying, silenced them by saying, monks, those monks who, like my son, Kachayana the Great, keep the doors of their senses guarded, are beloved both of gods and men. And then he taught this verse. So it's not actually an answer to the question of why he singled out Mahakajayana, but it's indirectly the implication here is that Mahakajayana is worth the respect. Why do you care if it's irrelevant as to whether someone only does it to him or does it to all of the great monks? It's worth doing. This paying respect is a good thing because of the qualities of Mahakajayana that are worthy of respect. So it's funny, you often get this in monasteries by jealous monks. They'll say, why did that monk get this? Some monks, sometimes you become obsessed because when your world is simplified to such an extent where the biggest sensual pleasure of the day is a bowl of food, that bowl of food can become quite an attachment. And if your bowl of food has better food than mine, gosh, some of the problems that come up in monasteries. So this idea of favoritism, some people revert to childhood, and he got more than me, and yada yada, so on and so on. But it's all the Buddha is saying, as I can see, is that it's worth doing. There's how can you criticize when people do pay respect to someone worthy of respect? It's funny because people often, it seems in modern times, especially in the West, have problems with paying respect in general. This idea that anyone should put their head at anyone else's feet. Why are we not? Why should we hold someone else above ourselves? I don't know that the Buddha particularly pushed this sort of thing. I mean, he did talk about how it's a good thing to be humble and to be respectful, and he seems to have followed it, but it doesn't seem to be a huge deal. He would it's a sort of one of those things that the Buddha would more often do this kind of thing and say, why wouldn't he? What's to be surprised about? Because here's someone who has tamed their mind, who has become free from all asava, who has a mind that is fixed and focused and well bent on good things. Someone whose faculties are tranquilized. Yasindriyana samatangatani. It's a nice phrase. So, what does this have to do with us? Well, this is the sort of thing we wish to emulate. We don't have to be arahants ourselves, not today. That's the ultimate goal. But even though we aren't arahants, we can emulate them. My teacher always said, "Iyang." Use this word, "iyang." It's a Thai word. When we have certain qualities, we are like them. We emulate them. Iyang. We emulate the arahants. Iyang pra-arahan. We emulate the arahants. Yasindriyani samatangatani. Because that's an important quality to emulate. It's something you should affect, in a sense, like kind of, it can be dangerous because it can just be a pretense where you just appear to be, people can appear to be very calm and tranquil, but inside their minds are a raging mess. But guarding your faculties is a huge part of morality. It's something that protects your fragile mind as you cultivate it, as you're developing it. So when monks go into the city, they're careful to look at the floor, not get caught up in the world around them, because it's too easy to lose track of your meditation subject. And so for all of us, this is a great reminder on even a superficial level to guard our faculties. It's also sort of a way of gauging our practice. How tranquil are our faculties? When we see something with the eye, are we immediately incensed with lust and desire or anger and aversion? When we hear sounds, when we smell smells, are we immediately disgusted or attracted? When we have tastes, are we partial, obsessed with good food and good tastes? This is a great way to judge your practice based on the faculties. We often miss this one, the senses. We miss how fundamental the senses are to experience. So with food, we might be clear on the chewing part, right? Okay, I can do eating meditation, chewing, swallowing. But we're not clear on the taste, and we miss the fact that taste plays such an important role in enlightenment, really. People wonder, there was a question of, in regards to food, how should we overcome our desire for food? Well, here it is. It's what's going on. You understand what's happening. That's how you deal with it, how you overcome it. You see the process of tasting something and being incensed with desire, lust, sensual lust for that taste, and you'll do anything to get that taste. Even just the thought of that taste inflames the mind. This is the Buddha said, Jiva adita, the tongue is on fire. Ganha, no, what's the Pali? Chakku, chakku adi, chakkung aditang. The grammar I can't remember. The eye is on fire, the ear is on fire with greed, on fire with anger, on fire with passion, on fire with anger, on fire with delusion. And delusion is like arrogance, conceit. I like, it's conceit just to say I like this, or I prefer onions, I prefer carrots, I prefer salty food, sweet food. It's ego, because we get very kind of proud in a sense, proud of having a preference. It's kind of like expressing our preference has some meaning. Like if someone says, "Oh, I'm partial to this," it's almost as though it's an important part of who they are, right? And Buddhists just shake their heads. Who you are is not important. So guarding the senses, but more tranquilizing the senses. So guarding is the first part, but this is talking about samattangatani, having gone to tranquility means putting out the fires. It's really a reference to that, the idea of quenching the fires, cooling the senses, so that seeing is just seeing, huge part of the Buddha's teaching. Remember the teaching to Bahya, ditte ditta matang bhavisati. Let seeing just be seeing. That's the goal. Really, and very hard for a non-meditator to understand, for a newcomer to Buddhism. Seeing is just seeing. Well, isn't that all it is? It's the problem. That's what we think it is, and we don't realize it's on fire. Our eye is on fire. The ear is on fire. So this is the powerful teachings of the Buddha in regards to the senses. It's a very powerful, important, useful part of the Buddha's teaching. That's why the Buddha again and again talked about the senses. The indriya, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and thinking. So asayata saratina sudanta, this is well trained like a horse. No, the meditator is the not the horse. The meditator is the cart person, the person riding the cart, sarati, charioteer we often translate it as. So they are the person, so you tame them like you tame a horse. And often the way you would tame a horse is by tying it up or fencing it up or getting on its back and letting it wear itself out. Just wearing itself out. You can't tie it down, or you can't beat it into submission. You just have to usually, I think, just have to outlast it and show it that you've got more patience than it does. So it might buck and jump and run around, but eventually it will get tired. The mind is sort of the same. So it's a fairly good analogy, because eventually the mind starts to notice that its behavior is hurting itself. If you're objective and alert, you start to see that you're causing yourself suffering. Oh yeah, this obsession with sights and sounds and smells and taste it's like a ping pong match. Everything I'm just reacting and bouncing back and forth like a ping pong ball. And so you slowly overcome that, and your senses calm down. Your mind becomes pahina. Pahina means sent, or like bent in the right direction, or focused or fixed in the right direction. Anasava, we had that yesterday, right? Without taints, without the outflowings, or without streams of defilements, without any connection, attachment to the world. Such a person is dear even to angels. So we've got a lot of, well, throughout this, we've had a lot of talk about angels, and I think that turns a lot of people off the Dhammapada stories. That's fine. It's not really important whether Saka actually came down and paid respect to Mahakachayana. The story is not really that important. They're kind of fun to read, and they often have at least a good moral to them, and they present an interesting framework. So if you don't want to believe them, that's fine. If you want to scoff and say angels, who's ever seen an angel, huh? I've never seen an angel. Then fine, that's fine. I like the stories. I think a lot of people do. And if you just put that aside, it's not important. What's important is whether the teaching is sound, and we can argue and debate about that. And so some people want to argue and debate as to whether paying respect is a good thing. In Buddhism, it is, because it leads to humility. Humility is a good thing. Not being proud leads to gratitude, a sense of gratitude when other people have done something for you, who have lifted you up. You know, they've done something for you that you couldn't do for them. So you respect them for that, and you honor and revere them for that. I mean, that's fairly standard, not just in Buddhism, not just in religion, but in amongst people who have this sort of sense. I think having been in a society that values that sort of thing, it changes you. And having been involved in Buddhism, it changes you. I think people have it in the West. They've kind of lost it. You know, the whole apple for the teacher thing. You know, it became eventually people started to scoff and say it was the people who were buttering up the teacher, or the brown nosers. Oh, that's such an awful saying, right? But you know, our Latin professor, his desk, the guy before us uses the chalkboard, old school mathematician guy, and he leaves the eraser on the desk, and there's a huge amount of chalk. He's just kind of ignorant about it. And there's a huge amount of chalk left on the desk for our art teacher, who uses a MacBook, that then gets all clogged up. And so the first thing he does when he comes in is he blows the dust off and tries to get rid of as much dust as he can. And I've kept meaning to bring in a cloth to wipe it down for him beforehand. And finally yesterday, I wiped it down for him before he got there, just with some toilet paper, because I forgot to bring a cloth again. But it's just a feeling like that's a good thing to do, because this is a person who I respect and who is doing a good thing for us. And as a student, I just feel moved to make his job easier. It helps me as well, but it's just you know, like respect and gratitude. But we can argue about that, and that's a valid point of argument. We shouldn't argue about whether Saka came down and paid respect to Mahakachayana. What else can we argue about? We can argue about whether these monks were good to criticize, or whether criticism is any good. And I think we have to have a little bit of a discussion about criticism, but I'll save that for the rest of the live session. So that's all for the Dhammapada for today. Thank you for tuning in. Keep practicing, and wishing you all the best. Okay.
Bande, I think there might be something wrong with the audio stream.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I couldn't hear it, and someone else mentioned they couldn't hear it either. So,
Oh, dear. I wonder if it's just recording blank.
well, it was coming out on YouTube fine, but somehow the audio stream doesn't seem to be picking it up.
Oh, dear. Why is it doing that? It's going to be totally empty. Now it should make sound. Yeah, it's working now. It's just there's so much you can configure in this thing. It's kind of neat, actually. I can tell it what to use as the input for each thing that's receiving audio. So it's quite awesome. It's just if you forget to set it, or if you set it wrong and forget to set it back. Anyway, now there should be sound. Apologies for that. But it's recorded and it'll be up on YouTube probably fairly soon. Hmm. So, do we have questions?
We do, but I'm still not getting anything out of the live audio stream, so maybe that's just me. Maybe someone else can weigh in on that, whether that's working. But I don't seem to be getting any sound out of that.
Hmm.
But we do have questions.
All right, well, I'll restart the audio. It should work.
Okay.
Okay, it's back on now. So
Okay.
now you should get it, I think. Maybe, maybe not. And again, nothing.
Yeah, I'm not getting anything.
Test. Hello? No, nothing. Huh. Wonder why that is.
Okay, Magpie says the sound is back now.
Why am I not getting it?
I'm not hearing it, but they are, so.
Maybe I have to refresh the page. Well, if you're not getting it, go to YouTube because I can't figure it out. It's not the most important of our concerns. So, I mean, it would be nice, but go to YouTube if you don't get it.
Hello, Bante. Although I note that I am concerned, is it wrong to be concerned about the length of time about the length of time one stays mindful on the movement of the foot by walking meditation? Thanks.
No, you're going to see impermanence. I mean, yeah, it'd be great if you could stay with the foot the whole time, but if you mean is it important to worry about the fact that you're wandering, it's not about worrying or being concerned. You should be alert, and when your mind does wander, stop and say thinking, or whatever, distracted, or if there's emotions or that kind of thing, just be mindful of it. We're trying to see the nature of the mind. It's impermanent, unsatisfying, uncontrollable. And you're seeing that. You're seeing that that habits are not you, are not yours. They come based on causes and conditions.
Is it true that even in Buddhist countries, only a fraction of the lay people have a daily meditation practice?
I don't know. I mean, it's a fairly. I'd have to make a generalization to say that. Why does that matter? Sorry, I wanted to talk about criticism. So we got 2 criticisms recently, and those are important. And I think thank you everyone for sort of trying to explain things that people may have not understood. But I think we have to accept the fact that we may be doing something wrong. Particularly, someone seems to be thinking it's important to live a simple life. So I think it's important to address these sorts of concerns. So yeah, there's a lot of expense involved with our thing right now. Well, the idea we're trying to start a meditation center, so I think it's fairly defensible. There's more here than just finding a place to live for one monk, because I could go live in Sri Lanka. Well, it's debatable. I could go live at Wat Khmer Krom. And there's no question that living here is good for me. It's nice for me to have my own place that I can, run as I see fit and not have to accommodate cultures of this country or that country, and people's interest more in their culture than in Buddhism, that kind of thing. But I was fairly comfortable at Wat Khmer Krom. It's just the idea of moving here was to be of more use to people, because very few people ever come to that part of the city. So we are doing things. It's picking up slowly, but we're more accessible in this location. So that was the idea. But really, it's a matter of, it should be, and how we should all see this is, if this were the opinion of everyone, then this place would stop existing. We wouldn't have this place. If everyone thought it would be better for this monk to stop teaching and to go off and live in the forest, then that would happen. But that was sort of the question that we put, and that's how we have to look at it going forward, is only because this is only happening because this is preferable to stopping making videos and going off and living in the forest. I mean, I could do these videos elsewhere. It's just always been a bit of an ordeal, so I've never really gotten into it. But now, having a place like this and sort of the freedom to do it, it's a lot more comfortable and convenient, and it's more likely that I'm going to do this kind of thing. So that's how we have to look at it. Is this worth doing? And if people think, no, it's not, this is just repeating the same thing over and over again, I don't think that it is. But, people are welcome to their opinion. So that's the first criticism. But then I think someone else, I would have just let that go and probably not responded if someone else hadn't come up with a criticism, like sort of like they were emboldened, because, if you don't want to be the first person to criticize when you're in a group of people who kind of seem to be appreciative. It's kind of like the sense of a cult. If this were a cult, then you'd be afraid to speak up, to speak out. So here's someone who's saying that practitioners and fellow monks have been treated very rudely, assuming by me, and even blocked from taking part in broadcasts. So I'd like to apologize. I am too quick to discount questions, and I don't know why that is, but that's sort of in my character, so I will try to change that and be more amenable to questions. But like, I am a little bit preoccupied with various things, and so sometimes my brain just doesn't work and I can't even process a question. So usually what happens is something enters the brain, however it does, and then the brain says, I can't handle that right now. When the brain looks at it and says, oh, that's an easy question, I know the answer and that's pretty clear. Or the brain says, oh my God, that's like a traffic jam, that's going to crash, and it just says, no, I'm sorry. So I'll try to be a little bit less terse in my responses, but I'm still going to sometimes say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. That's the first part. As far as people being treated rudely, so that might be what that's referring to. I don't know, actually. It's not been made clear, but I'll accept that criticism. Maybe I am sometimes rude. Maybe I'm mean. I'm assuming it's me that's referring to, so I'll take the criticism personally. But as far as being blocked from taking part in broadcasts, I don't think that's ever happened. We did do broadcasts before where some people were getting off track, and I'm pretty sure one of the people was high, and he started giggling and talking about how good marijuana is. He claims that he wasn't high. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't, but I wasn't the one who complained. Other people were complaining, so we decided to institute a bit of a policy, quite a policy of only having people familiar. And so this person is saying that Robin's getting special treatment, and I think Robin is getting special treatment. I treat her specially, but it's not because she's bringing in money. Really, we're not that crass. I mean, it's never been about money. Um, yeah, okay, for supporting and for being very supportive, but who wouldn't be if someone has clearly a positive mindset and who is helpful to you? I mean, why wouldn't you treat them well? Contrarily, if someone's treating you poorly, you'd kind of be. I mean, it's not that we should be judgmental. Obviously, that would be a problem if we favored people who were nice to us, right? But there's not much you can say to someone who is kind of being mean to you. You try to be polite and try to be fair to them, to not be impartial, not be partial against them. But I can't see a way around that. When people are kind to you, you feel grateful and you want to be kind back to them. But there's more to it than that people don't understand. The real reason why a person like Robin is welcome on this broadcast is because she's put in the work. She's done the practice. She's online with what we do. I think I haven't acknowledged that enough, honestly. I mean, it's kind of something that I haven't really thought of. Robin, did you ever do an interview? Did we ever do an interview with you? I'm sorry, my memory is very bad.
No, I don't think so. No.
I want to do interviews with everyone, and I feel like somehow I missed the what do you call? Kind of dropped the puck, drop the mic. What do I say? Not drop the puck. That's something else. Drop the mic on that one. Is that how you say it? And Aurora as well. I mean, I knew she had finished, and I don't think I've done an interview with her either. Anyway, there's one example of how I can think I haven't respected that enough, because that's really a great thing. I was kind of got into the idea that no one on our group committee had ever finished the course, and that's really important. When I was in Winnipeg, I pushed for our board to be completely made up of people who have done the course, a full course. So when we started here in Ontario, I got only those people who had done at least a partial course, like Anthony has done some, and Manbina has finished the course uh, in her own way, but she has finished it. Same as with Robin. I think Aurora did a full course. Did she stay with me the whole time? Do you remember how that went? I think she stayed
No,
for
I think she did a full 3 weeks all at
did
once.
the whole thing intensive, yeah, all
Yeah.
at once. Robin, you did it spread out, right?
I did 1 week, then 2 weeks. Yes.
Right. So that's still all intensive. Manbina did most of it the way we're doing it now online. So now we've got like 18 people going through a expanded course where they go through the one stage a week instead of one stage a day. So I meet with them once a week, and they're just doing 2 hours a day for the most part. Some more, some less. But yeah, I'd say that's far more important to me, is being reassured by someone's views, because who cares if they're giving you lots of money? They can be really. I've had that before, where you feel kind of bad because you feel like you should be grateful to them because they're getting you this, getting you that, supporting your monastery, but then they turn out to be kind of needy and greedy and arrogant, like feeling like they deserve some kind of special recognition. And how do you deal with such people? So yes, it's important to not give preferential treatment to that extent. Uh, to some extent, it's important. What I mean is not to have partiality, but I think you can't avoid some special treatment. Certainly for people who are you consider you can guarantee that their views are in line with yours. Hmm. As opposed to just anyone who might come on here and start mm, interrupting and disturbing the process, which is what happened. We had a lot of people, completely open, anyone who wanted on. And I even we even had everyone chiming in, and people didn't like that. And I didn't think it was that useful either, because I was kind of having fun with it, I suppose. But if you look back on some of our old ones in Sri Lanka, I think it was, yeah, early times in Sri Lanka, um, it became less useful and people complained. So I thought that's valid criticism, and so we changed. So I'm open to criticism. If other people have criticism and want to say, look, Bante, or look, Venerable Sir, or hey, you, I think you suck because of this, that's cool. Thank you. Happy to hear it. And I should be happy to hear it. And we all have to be happy to hear it. So good for them. Thank you for that. Appreciate your criticism. You may be wrong. You may be totally out of line with your criticism, but that's not gonna be my default response. I want to consider this carefully. Remember, it struck me so profoundly. Well, wasn't a profound thing, but it really hit me kind of like, whoa. Um, it was a simple thing. We were coming out of Ajahn Tong's kuti once, and I looked and he didn't have his outer robe on. I hadn't been there that long, and I said, "Oh, he's Ajahn doesn't have his outer robe on, his sangati. As normally we wear it like on top, folded up on top. Thai robes are a lot thinner after all, and thus aren't a very good fit in Canada. Honestly, this is why most monks have stopped relying on their robes and they're wearing coats. The real reason for thicker robes. I should show you my thick robe. Because I'm trying, and it might be some people will certainly think this is misguided and will think that I should start wearing a coat. But this is my Canada robe. So this is a thin Thai robe here. This is just it's actually a double layered, so it's twice as thick. Very few monks use even this, I think. No, it might be single layered. I don't know. I think it's just single layered. Anyway, so it's a single layer of very thin cotton, about the substance of a bed sheet, like a cotton, fairly fine muslin cotton. It's a good quality, and then lined with wool. And that's special. You don't get that. You can't buy that. Someone had to. One of my supporters in Thailand makes women's clothing, and so she has seamstresses um, under her hire. They work out of their houses. So we went to someone's house and she sewed this wool on. It's quite a thing. My student from Iran got, if I remember correctly, he paid for a bunch of that wool, and they brought it to Bangkok. And someone else, it was a real group, kind of like the last story, right? Where they're all, was it the last story or one of the stories, where they're all gathering together to make a robe. So that's my robe. And this is the other robe. It is a jean material. It's still quite thin. So thicker, yes. And the problem is that in Thailand, we're getting these from Thailand. And in Thailand, this kind of robe is not very often used. They used to have them, but now they're apparently just making them special order. That's not quite fair, because it's also a big robe, because I'm taller than most Thai people as well. So another reason why I can't wear Thai robes is they're too short. It's like a one size fits all, because most Thai people are the same height, which is considerably shorter than I am. And there are tall Thai people, but they also need special robes. So that's the whole robe thing. And I can't remember how I got off on that tangent, so I have no hope of getting back on track. So I'll end it there. Thank you for the criticism, and I will take it into consideration. And if you want to criticize more, please do. Happy to have it. So, any more questions?
Yes, lots more questions. I put a question in too to the person who said that people were blocked from the broadcast, because I'm not really sure what that means, blocked from the broadcast. I only know that you've sometimes declined to answer a question because it was not related, or But
I think it's more being blocked from being on the panel. That's how I took it, because you're treated special. You're allowed on the panel, or I don't know.
oh, okay. Well, maybe they'll explain what they meant.
I only need one person, and Robin's very dedicated. We should all thank her for coming out every night and being on here. So
Well, thank you.
fighting with her electronics and us fighting together. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I
So
enjoy it. Thank you, Bante.
thank you.
Just the last question there about, is it true that even in Buddhist countries, only a fraction of the lay people have a daily meditation practice? Just my own follow-up question to that. I was kind of interested in Buddhist demographics, just basic things like, are there more monks today than there were, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Is the monasticism growing, declining? I couldn't find any sort of Buddhist demographics.
I
And that
guess
would
what
kind of
Go ahead.
And that would kind of fall into that too, how many people practice meditation. I'm not sure if it's just in English this information isn't available, or whether it's really not counted or calculated, but it does seem to be very hard to find sort of demographic information on Buddhism.
Sure. It's just I don't feel so comfortable answering it. Or, I mean, not quite what this forum is for. I get the feeling when I hear that question, it's like, okay, want to stay on track. Let's ask questions about our practice. I mean, there are lots of useful questions, but I think there are lots of useful questions that I'd rather not answer here, just for time purposes and clarity, and for my own ability in my mind, because I'd have to start speculating. And the best is if it's something I can find in the Tipitaka, and that's not a question I can find in the Tipitaka.
Yeah. But if anyone finds a source for Buddhist demographics, put it on the chat panel, because I'd be interested, just as kind of general knowledge for my own personal knowledge. But next question. Is it unwholesome to destroy spider webs? I've been thinking, on the one hand, you're making it a little safer for bugs, but on the other hand, I guess it could be upsetting to the spiders. Only asking because I've been asked to take them down at work before.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting one, because I've thought about that as well. Monks are instructed, here we go with one in the Tipitaka. Monks are instructed, I think it's in the Tipitaka, when you move into a new kuti, you're supposed to take all the cobwebs down, all the spider webs down. It's one of the first things you're supposed to do. Now, I think that's kindness, but upsetting animals is not generally considered a important consideration. Now, if it's being cruel to animals on purpose, that's something else. But, for example, stealing something from an animal is not considered stealing. I don't know, you think you could argue against that one, but it could still be very unwholesome, right? It can be cruel and so on. Yeah, I don't think that's a good example, but it is in the Tipitaka. So maybe that counts against it. Maybe the monks were kind of disregarding of animal welfare. I don't know. But it's an interesting question, and it's something you have to consider both ways. But I think it's the sense of how you hurt the child to save its life, right? Sometimes if the child's got something stuck in its throat, you have to reach in, and even if you draw blood, you want to get that out. So what that means is the spiders built the web to do something evil. So you don't have to respect its web. You don't have to say, okay, I'll let you continue doing that. You don't have a duty to go through the forest breaking up spider webs, right? That's not exactly proper. That's just gonna, in the end, get you obsessed with spiders. Maybe get on the spider's bad list, hit list in the end, and maybe you'll end up as a fly in the spider's web. Who knows? But you shouldn't have any. I think the argument could be made that you don't have any responsibility to the spiders because they're doing a bad thing. Now, what about something else, like ants living in or termites living in your walls, or that kind of thing? Gets more difficult, and I don't think there's one good answer to it. I think you can justify it, but Probably problematic. I think in general they consider it to be um, something, a necessary evil, kind of. Like you justify it by saying, look, these animals don't know any better, but in the interests of propriety, this is my space. The animals don't belong here. And practically speaking, I can't let them, eat the walls down. So that doesn't mean you exterminate them, but like they were in my cave, and I did move them out one by one and try and insert them one by one back into a termite mound outside, because otherwise they ate right through my tent. I had a tent in this cave to keep the mosquitoes and to keep the mosquitoes out, and they ate right through the vinyl to get at the books that were inside the tent. When I was away in Thailand, came back and they had smelt the books and eaten right through the tent to get at them. So I think there's an argument for removing them because in the interests of boundaries. Again, it's often not that clear. And remember, you're talking about mind states. Karma is not this is right, that's right. Karma is a mind state is wholesome or a mind state is unwholesome. So you try your best to keep your mind wholesome. Um, that being said, there are clearly acts which involve intense unwholesomeness, and you have to watch out for those acts. But in a case like this, well, watch yourself, and if you feel like I can't do that, it's going to give rise to too much unwholesomeness, then maybe you can't do that. Maybe it's time to abandon your house to the termites, go live somewhere else.
Do arahants experience boredom?
No, absolutely not. Boredom is anger based.
I want to introduce meditation to a dear friend as a medium to solve her panic problems. What's the best way to do so? I'm afraid to do it wrong because while it can be lay practice, it is related to a religion.
Depends what your concerns are. If you're concerned about your ability to teach it, then there's no reason to be concerned. Just teach it as you've been taught, as it's given to you. Where I want to find that, because what
It's
exactly?
48 minutes ago, Giovanni.
Something to do with, related to a religion, so the meaning is maybe they are religious and it would disturb them if they thought it was about Buddhism. I mean, it's you can see the meditation is quite secular. I've always joked that Buddhism is quite secular itself, so it's nothing to do with religion, really. Um, so you say, well, this is a technique that works for me. That's usually the best way to go about it, is explain how it's worked for you. If it hasn't worked for you yet, then probably shouldn't be teaching others. But if it has worked for you, then you can say, hey, this has worked for me. And when they look at you and you're more calm, and they'll say, oh, okay, I believe you. And then you can help them. Or you can say, hey, this is something I'm looking at because I've been told it helps me. So maybe you want to try it as well. Maybe it'll work for you. There's no reason to be afraid. Try it. Be honest and open. People appreciate when you're just honest and say, hey, I want to help. And the worst you can do is be pushy about it and say, hey, I really think you should. Did you try it yet? Did you do it yet? Did it work? Did it help? You just turn people off that way.
Feel free to skip over this, but I'm just curious how are classes going, or has the semester not yet started for you?
They're okay. I'm actually thinking maybe to switch to take some psychology courses, because it strikes me that that's actually more interesting from a Buddhist perspective than religious studies, which is what I'm in. I'm not really keen on writing papers, because for the most part they want us to write papers in undergrad about things that aren't interesting to us. That's what I remember from before. They give you something that you have to talk about, and I'm like, I don't really want to talk about that. I have to write a paper about Descartes this week, and it's not really that interesting to me. So I'm just going through the motions for some of that. Languages is great. I think I was right to focus on taking languages, which is probably something I'll focus on. but maybe some psychology to learn about how addiction works and the mind works, abnormal psychology, that kind of thing. I think could be quite useful. But I don't know. The other hand, I was thinking of maybe quitting. Maybe I won't go back in January and just focus more on teaching. I mean, this is what's important, right? And now that I've got these 4 slots a day, it's a pretty full schedule. Manageable, but pretty full. Anyway, thanks for asking.
Hello, I'm currently enlisted in the American military as a musician. My primary job does not involve killing or harming others. But with my recent practice of Buddhism, I'm finding it difficult to reconcile Buddhist ideals of the five precepts while training myself to shoot firearms, learn hand to hand combatives, and be proficient in tasks, and that are all intentionally meant to harm others more effectively. Am I overthinking this issue?
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned with that. I mean, it's like that video games argument. People were saying, when you kill in a video game, is it like killing? Is it bad karma? Um, Someone was telling me, my stepmother, I think, was talking about how guns, when kids play with guns, and they shoot each other, right? Cowboys and Indians or whatever, shooting each other with guns, it's actually a form of communication. That's what she was saying. I'm not quite clear, but there's clearly been some research done on what it actually means. And while it is true that violent video games and playing with guns can sort of provide a catalyst for people who are disturbed or for people's unwholesome tendencies to come to light, their acts in and of themselves are not unwholesome if you're mindful. Shooting targets that look like people, if you're clear it's a target, it's not what you think it is. It's not an unwholesome thing. Oh boy, I'm learning to shoot. That could be a person. Well, it's not a person. Even going on an obstacle course where you have cutouts of people and you have to shoot them, it's not a person. When you're doing the obstacle course, it's not a person. And that's the first part. The second part is, there is a case, I think, for the use of force in self-defense. Never to the extent of killing, but you can definitely make a case for, like, a monk isn't allowed to hit another human being unless it's in self-defense. And then I think it's only to the extent necessary to get away, to escape. So it's not to hurt, actually, it's to get away. And hand-to-hand combat can be useful for that. So that's not a very important argument, but it's an example of how it can be used for a positive thing, because you don't want to be hurt by others. It's bad for them when they hurt you. So if you can escape, you're actually helping them to not hurt you. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But there was something. Um,
How about being a musician in the army or in the military?
no, that's not. I mean, musicians for lay people is not a really big deal. But yeah, it struck me that you're in the military learning how to kill, so you may be called upon to kill, right? That's more concerning. I think you would still, the reason why you're learning all that is because you might be called upon to kill. That part of it is somewhat concerning. I don't know how it works, but I'm assuming even the non-combatants are expected to shoot and to kill. So you're kind of either lying to them, not exactly lying, but sorry, I don't mean to be a downer, but it's kind of deceptive if you're not intending to. Or I don't know how the military works, but I know the American military is a big institution and does a lot of things. So anyway,
Yeah, there are jobs in the military, like in the Navy, there are construction jobs. I mean,
right.
the
But
American
but the
military
but
is a huge
you still learn hand to hand, or you still learn gun combat for the purpose ostensibly of killing people, right? Of defending your
I
country.
believe that's part of the basic training for all military. It's part of basic training, but realistically, when you're in construction jobs and different sort of things,
but still, it's kind of the the intention behind it, or the implication behind it. Like, as I said, going to a gun range isn't the problem, but going to the gun range so you can be a better killer, or going, um, getting into the army with the the ostensible, um, the implied duty that you have is to shoot to kill, or be, yeah, to have a duty, a role in shooting people. I don't know. You're saying not really, but it's not so much. I'm not so much referring to practically speaking. Talking more about you're still a soldier, I think is the point. I mean, I don't know. You could still be considered to be someone who has a duty to kill, which is a problem.
What is the meaning of monks being devoted to their masters?
Um, well, it means being respectful and accepting their teachings, listening and putting into practice their teachings. But it's a fine line, because what if your teacher's wrong? What if your teacher's teaching you something harmful? So, it's an issue, and so that's something you have to do. Ideally, you do that first. You learn about the person, you hang out with them, you watch them, and so on. And when you see, okay, this person is teaching something that seems bulletproof, or bulletproof, flawless. I don't know. Um, and so then you should dedicate yourself. And how much you dedicate is up to you. You should never be totally devoted, so that if they tell you to kill someone, you'll do it. So, and that happens actually, not kill someone, but often teachers, you hear a lot about these gurus who end up sleeping with their students because they manage to convince them that somehow it's for their spiritual benefit. And when you get kind of hypnotized into such devotion, it's easy to be slowly pulled into it, right? Which is, scary. So you never want to completely close off the skepticism, but devotion does mean putting aside your skepticism, at least somewhat. It also means being grateful and respectful and helpful. In Buddhism, there are duties that a student has to their teacher, and there are duties that a teacher has to the student, mostly from a monastic context, but they could be adapted. But you're talking about monks, so yeah, in a monastic context, there are duties that monks have to their teachers. We don't get to do them that often, not to people like Ajahn Tong, for example, but we try. Washing his feet. I've washed Ajahn Tong's feet before. Um, Carrying his bowl, sweeping out his kuti, sweeping out around his kuti, that kind of thing.
Is the ninth jhana, Nirodha Samapatti, the same as Nibbana?
Yeah.
Can an enlightened being react yet be non-attached? Like their karma compels them to do something and react away, but they are non-attached to the actions they are doing?
I don't know. I'm not able to really answer that. It's a bit vague because every action, every response to something is a react. So they respond to things, yes. I mean, you might be making it too complicated. Arahants don't react to things with greed, anger, or delusion. So if you're asking, do they respond with greed, anger, or delusion? No, they don't. If you're asking, do they respond to things? Like if you ask them a question, well, they're going to react. They're going to respond. Maybe.
Hello, Bante. Could you maybe say a few words about the suffering that goes along with being afraid of dying in the present moment? Is it sometimes too overpowering to just note it? It has quite an intensity. Thank you, Bante.
I was just one of the meditators emailed me about intense situations that are hard to note or that you can't note. If something is too intense to note, then sometimes you have to be clever and approach it obliquely, not directly. So you might, if it's in sitting meditation, you might lie down to make yourself more comfortable. It's not, lying meditation isn't something that you should always be doing, but in certain extreme cases, it's useful to calm you down a little bit, make it easier to deal with. Or you might analyze it and you might pick it apart and pick some part of it that you can be mindful of. But once you get, this is why we practice with this rising and falling, so we can get good at this and build up our ability to note. And when you become strong enough, then really you just acknowledge the fear as afraid, pick it apart. There's the emotion, there's the feeling, there's the thought of dying, and they're separate from each other. If you pick one and acknowledge it, you see that it's not a problem, and you pick something else and you see that's not a problem, and you realize, oh, there is no problem. There's just different experiences. Even the fear isn't a problem, it's just fear rises and ceases.
Dear Bhante, when my eyes start burning, I notice seeing, then liking, then I close them. But the seeing continues with a kind of movie created in my mind. Then I notice thinking, but I'm confused if it should be noted seeing or thinking.
I would say seeing. If it's actually a vision, it should be seeing.
It's a lot of stuff, but I think they're mostly comments. Okay. Construction in the military is unwholesome, surely, because it's building things to harm others.
Depends. I put we talked about this on Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange. But I don't know that I really want to go into that. It's not so focused on our meditation. I mean, it's important for people to know about their livelihood. Short answer, often you can get away with your work if it's just work. If you're just building, lifting, hammering, whatever. Because we don't think like that. It's not about. It is to some extent, but yeah, no, there is something there, something to think about. No, not so much. It's more the people who own the company. If there's a company that is making guns or making tanks or making this, then they are the ones that are really responsible. The workers are just doing their work. They can be, you could make an argument, and you might disagree with it, but I think you could make a good argument for the fact that they're just doing a job. They're just trying to make money. They're not trying to kill people. So they put things together. But the person who's selling the guns has the intention to make a gun, has the intention to sell guns. I think it's a different issue, a different category. But you can argue it as you like. I mean, it's obviously got some dangers to it.
Wouldn't a mindful monk be more concerned with the state of the mind than self-defense, and so they would not react in a violent manner?
Could be, yeah. I think you have to. We're not talking about a monk, right? A mindful monk, yeah. It's just not considered to be an offense. So you could say, well, that person's clearly still concerned with their well-being, so they're not an arahant. But on the other hand, a person who's not an arahant would probably be in their best interest to stay alive so they could continue practicing. But I think there's more to it that you can also argue. You could argue that an arahant is somehow not negligent in regards to the benefit of others. So for them to just sit by and do nothing would be negligent to the benefit of the person who's trying to hurt them, to some extent. They wouldn't go out of their way to exonerate others or to save others from their bad actions, but they would try to do what they could to convince the other person or to get away from the other person even, I think. I think an argument could be made for an arahant hitting a person who's attacking them without any greed or anger or anything, but just to get them back mindful. No, I don't know. I can't say for sure, but that seems reasonable. Seems like an argument could be made. Again, I don't have all the answers. For those of you who thought I had all the answers, I apologize because I don't have all the answers.
You have good answers, though.
Some.
There are no Vipassana centers near where I live. Can I learn to progress in my practice alone? I feel as if I would benefit greatly from a retreat.
You can go for it. I mean, you're welcome to do a course. We have online courses, so if you click on the Meet button the Meet thing up at the top, you can sign up and we can do a course with me. If you're interested, there's already, I think, 18 people right now doing that. But you could also do a self-retreat. Not as recommended and highly and potentially problematic in various ways, but also potentially quite helpful, quite beneficial.
How do you understand reality if understanding is built through the very construct of what it is? In other words, in the very end aim of meditation, how do you get rid of thoughts to receive truth if getting rid of thoughts is a process of thinking in itself?
Yeah, I mean, you haven't even tried our meditation, or you aren't set up to do our meditation, so I can't, it's not really about explaining what you just asked. I'd recommend that you try it, and if it doesn't work, then you have your answer. You can't understand reality. But check out our meditation, my booklet on how to meditate. Try meditation, and then you can see, oh, actually, I can understand reality. Because it's getting late and my brain starts to shut down. I don't have much of an answer for that one, sorry. Especially you're not one of our meditators, so. I mean, it's fine. I mean, you could argue, well, how would I meditate if I don't think it's going to help me, if I'm not going to understand anything from it? Well, I have people who are meditating and seem to think it is helping their meditation, so let's answer their questions. That's enough for me.
Yeah, definitely reading the booklet first would help with, because some of the things are explained right in the booklet.
Well, and I think this question comes from sort of a logic point of view, like if this, then that kind of thing. You're arguing, and you can argue anything. You can say, well, it's not. This isn't possible because of this. Okay, except that through empirical evidence, it's clear that that's wrong. So your argument breaks down with the fact that my practice shows me that you can't understand reality. So that's probably the best. I mean, best defense for me. Doesn't help you so much, but you could try it and see. Then you'll lose that. The thing is, you can argue so many things that are wrong, and have a cogent argument that is wrong, right? Because the premises are faulty, or you're missing some premises, or this kind of thing.
How do Nama, Rupa, and Chitta work with the noting technique?
It's a good question. If you can save it maybe for tomorrow, I'll get into that. Happy to talk about it. I mean, it's a bit of a technical question. I mean, do you really need to know that? But if you really want to know, I can answer it tomorrow.
Hello, Bhante. Is noting mindfulness the best path to nirvana? It seems as though it can either desire worldly things unconsciously or be conscious and leave these desires and just be mindful all the time. Is this true? Thank you and keep up the good work.
Yes, noting mindfulness is the best path to nirvana. I don't have so much to say to the second part, but it sounds like there's an implication um, like desiring worldly things might be somehow better. But you're missing the part that desiring worldly things actually causes you lots of suffering and stress. It's an important part of the statement. But otherwise, your statement seems fairly true. It's just consciousness is better because, or mindfulness is better because less suffering as well. Thank you for the encouragement. So that's all for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks, Robin, for your help.
Thank you, Bhante.
I'll be back tomorrow.
Good night.
Good night.